All right, today we're going to be talking about the prong collar, the tool that positive reinforcement people hate. I think the only thing that they hate more is the e-collar. That's because they don't understand the usefulness of the tool. The first thing I'm going to say is that with every tool, be it the prong collar and the e-collar, we don't use it to teach obedience. You use obedience to teach the tool. And in order for that to happen, you must lay a foundation. And the foundation is by allowing the dog to understand the concept of relieving pressure. Relieving pressure. So here is a little video of me working with little mama, just teaching her how to relieve pressure. She's going to be sniffing them, and at which point I'm gonna tug on the leash a little bit, and when I tug on the leash, right there, as soon as she turns, I'm gonna click, and then I'm gonna reward. So a lot of dogs fight with the leash. So the concept is the dog gets to the end of the leash, and when it feels pressure, the moment it looks towards me, I use the clicker. Okay, this is step 2 in my system of dog training. And the moment you do this, you're no longer using the flat collar to teach obedience, but you are using obedience to teach the tool. In this case, a flat collar. Basically, I feel pressure. What do? Well, I'll look at my handler for direction. When I do this, I turn and I relieve pressure. Oh, when I relieve pressure, I hear a click. I now get to choose my own behavior. Okay? It's very similar to the idea of teaching the dog the place command through using marker training, positive reinforcement. And then once the dog is in a place, let's say a mat, the dog is not allowed to leave that mat. And then we use the prong collar in the mode of negative reinforcement, which is slight pressure, to remind the dog that they are not to move. Okay? But we don't actually teach the place using the prong collar. So the place command is shaped using positive reinforcement, and then negative reinforcement, the prong collar, is used to keep the dog there and extinguish the behavior of the dog getting up and wandering off. And that's the difference between using a tool to teach obedience versus using obedience to teach the tool. Okay? Using the tool to teach obedience would be to correct the dog, and then get the dog to go onto the place. Okay? Where with the other method, the place comes first, and then if the dog chooses to move before we tell them the release command, we then turn around and use the tool. Like with all tools, you must be careful with something called positive superstition. What is a positive superstition? A positive superstition is when the dog develops a long-lasting fear of something. Positive superstition is very useful for poison-proofing your dog. For example, you have some chicken breast that you put by your fence. Your dog comes out of the house wearing an e-collar. The dog goes up to the chicken breast, and you then correct the dog. The thing is with the e-collar, and at this point you have to, this is a negative reinforcement, this is positive punishment, you want it high up. And the dog then develops a superstition that eating something in the yard equals a very negative experience, a very bad experience, and doesn't do it again. Now, where you can screw the dog up is that if that dog doesn't have the proper communication foundation, the dog may start to think that the pain didn't happen because the dog was eating something. The pain happened because the dog left the house, or because the neighbor was next door over, or something like this. And that's how you screw up a dog with an e-collar and a prong collar. It's much easier to do it with an e-collar. And this is why the prong collar is the prerequisite for learning, before learning of the e-collar starts. And when I say learning, I'm not talking about the dog, I'm talking about you. So the first step with the prong collar is, number one, to have basic mechanical obedience down. Mechanical obedience are things like sit, down, the heel place, and most important, the release command. You see, the release command is extremely important for the tool to be used correctly, meaning for obedience to be used to teach the tool. Again, we put the dog in a place command, let's say on a pad, or let's say on a crate. The dog now knows that it's supposed to stay there until the word, let's say, okay is used, and they can step off. Now, in a sterile environment, this is quite easy to do, because the dog knows that once the word okay is used and it steps off, it's going to be rewarded. But it's a little bit different when there is rabbits and squirrels and people and other dogs around. And of course, that could be anything. That could be the heel command, that could be the car seat, and so on and so on. And once you factor in the competing motivators, that's when you start to use pressure. Pressure being negative reinforcement, as in just pressure and the dog relieves it, or positive punishment being a good firm pop with the prong collar. And that's how we shape behavior using this tool. Obedience to teach the tool, not the other way around. So that's foundation, the foundational obedience with leash pressure, clicker, and the mechanics of sit, down, place, and the release command are imperative. Sit in itself, down in itself, heel in itself is not obedience. It's not the obedience process. It's mechanics. It's mechanics. Because the way we can explain it most easy is that anything that can happen in a sterile environment but fails to happen in an environment that is not as sterile, meaning there's competing motivators such as other dogs, rabbits, chickens, people, is obedience. So my dog may be able to sit in the living room where it's a 100% sterile environment, but it's not obedience until the dog can do it under severe destruction, because there's other competing motivators. Okay, that's the difference between mechanical activity, like teaching the dog the mechanic of sit, and actually them doing it in an environment where there's competing motivators. Okay, and for that you can check out this video here.
Okay.
So I didn't offer the behavior. I didn't say sit at the gate. I didn't tell the dog to stop. I didn't offer the behavior. It happened automatically. I allowed the dog to make a choice to fail at making the right choice, to stopping at the gate, or to go through the gate. I allowed the dog to make a choice. Failure would equal a correction. Success equals some kind of a positive reinforcement. But eventually that's faded, not always. Okay? That's a whole different topic. Overpraising. Good girl, oh, you're the best. Too much. Too much. Okay? But the key here is I didn't offer an alternative behavior. When you offer alternative behaviors, you are actually failing at obedience because you don't know if the dog is going to do it or not without your direction. Not giving the direction and having the desired behavior happen, which is the dog stopping at the gate, is obedience. Giving the dog an alternative behavior like sit, telling the dog, and then opening the gate, it's not giving the dog a choice to fail or succeed. You offered an alternative behavior. Now, yes, the dog can turn around and succeed or fail that alternative behavior, but it's not a choice. It's something you did. So, as you can tell in this video, I am talking to little mama. Okay? I'm talking to her. Bunch of gibberish I'm saying, and then all of a sudden I say the word. Okay. And the dog then goes and eats. Why would I do that? Well, because the dog is in a sit. And the dog is not allowed to get out of the sit until I use that one particular word. So I do this little drill every morning. I talk to her, I tell her 20 different random words. Sometimes I count, I can speak in Polish, I can count in Brazilian, un, dos, tres, whatever. But until she hears a word, she is not to move. It's a bit of a brain stimulation exercise, but all those words are also in a way competing motivators, because I don't want her to respond just to anything. I want her to respond just to that one particular thing. Of course, the other competing motivator is the food. The food is the competing motivator. No different than instead of putting her in a sit with food in front of her, I would put her in a heel with a dog walking by. Is she going to get out of the heel or not? So it's very important to understand that you have to have a decent amount of obedience and the release word. This is why it's so important. You see, if I put the dog on the pad, and this is now going to show you how to not screw up a dog with a prong collar and an e-collar. This is one of the key here. When I put the dog on the pad, or when I open the crate, the dog knows that until I say okay, the dog is not to move. So now, if I say nothing and the dog moves, I can apply pressure. And the dog starts to build very quickly an association of, oh man, I'm supposed to be here. I moved without being told not to move. This happened. But when I do move while being told to move, good things happened. So, good behavior feels good. Bad behavior feels not so good. Or in the case of punishment, definitely not so good. So these are the things that are very important. In regards to the the prong collar, it's the same thing as with the e-collar. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to show the dog this. You know, different dogs have different sensitivity levels. You're going to put this on the dog. And then, supervised only, you're going to keep this on the dog. And you will not use it. And the reason why is because you don't want the dog to become collar wise, meaning I only listen to you when this is on. Okay? You don't ever put any equipment on the dog and start using it right away. Okay? Second thing is you never leave the dog unsupervised with a prong collar. The prong collar can attach itself or get snugged up onto a chain link fence, pretty much anything. And God help you if two dogs are playing and those prong collars get intertwined and the dogs start to fight. Have fun separating that. Also, it's dangerous for the dog's teeth to have that type of a collar. So, only when supervised. Best thing is you take the collar, you put it on the dog, you don't use it, and you walk the dog. The dog has a positive experience. Now it starts to have built a positive superstition, not a negative superstition like we talked about with the food, but a positive superstition with the collar. Then after about a week, you start using it. Okay? The process for using the collar is exactly the same as I showed you in the video for the flat collar. Meaning, you're going to start off with a sterile environment. I have a barn. I live out in the country. You may have a double car garage. Take the dog somewhere and the dog is not distracted, and lay down the foundation of the communication. Your dog already has obedience. Your dog already has learned that leash pressure, when the dog feels leash pressure, it relieves leash pressure, good things happen. So now all you're going to do is you're going to switch from your flat collar to the prong collar. Now, the reason why you're going to do this is because eventually the competing motivator, a squirrel, a rabbit, another dog, is going to be far more juicy and far more important than your cookie. And this is something that positive reinforcement people don't understand. Or maybe they do understand it, they just don't want to admit it. It has its limitations. So when you introduce the dog to the prong collar, you will introduce the dog the same way you introduce the dog to leash pressure with the flat collar. Pressure slightly applied, and the moment you see that head turn, the moment you see a relief of the pressure, you will then turn around and click. And the dog will learn that when I feel this, I relieve the pressure, good things happened. And that's marked by the clicker, and then it's followed up with the reward. This is extremely, extremely, extremely important. The other thing that's very important is allowing the dog to make its own decisions. But that's another video that I'm going to make. But in that moment, when the dog comes to the end of the leash, you're allowing the dog to make a decision. And that decision is I relieve the pressure, or that decision is I don't. Too many people offer alternative behaviors to avoid the situation where the dog can have a chance to make a choice. i.e., you see something that the dog may get out of heel position. You tell the dog to focus on you. And then you offer that behavior. The dog did it. You walk by this other dog or person or whatever, and you think you succeeded. You didn't succeed. You didn't allow the dog to fail in getting out of the heel position, and you therefore didn't allow the dog to receive a correction or pressure, and you didn't allow the dog to succeed in the heel position. You offered the dog alternative behavior, which is actually similar to the E4 effort, E4 entitlement participation trophy education system, where kids don't get to fail and don't get to succeed because everything is done for them. What a fucking disaster that has been. So for the prong collar, you will follow the same setup as for the flat collar. Best thing is, if you learned now following the same protocol or the procedure as using the flat collar, being in the same sterile environment, slowly teaching the dog the communication and the art of relieving the pressure with the flat collar. Notice what I said, teaching the dog how to relieve the pressure, okay? Using obedience to teach the tool. You will then start going outside in a sterile place, like a football field. You will teach the dog loose leash walking. Without fundamental mechanic obedience, as in sit down, place command, and an okay to release the position or some kind of a release word. The heel command also ingrained into the dog via always feeding it from the same side from the clicker. Without this, the prong collar doesn't come on. And the prong collar is never used to extinguish the behavior of choosing competing motivator, i.e. a squirrel or rabbit, until you can loose leash walk the dog. If you cannot loose leash walk the dog in an empty field, and you start to correct the dog in environment that is stimulating to the dog, full of competing motivators, such as a pet store, for example, that's when you can turn around and run into the problem of negative superstitions, meaning superstitions you don't want, meaning I'm at PetSmart, I'm all over the place, you know, because I don't really know loose leash walking, I don't really know the heel, I want to go sniff this dog, that is yanking at me, that dog is an asshole, every time I see a dog, this happens, I want to kill all dogs. And that's how you run into problems. Don't run into problems. Don't turn tools that can be life-altering in regards to owning the quality of ownership of the dog into nightmares and screwing up the dog. I will do a separate video on loose leash walking. I'm going to look at my notes here. I think I covered everything. Yeah, preconditioning phase covered, conditioning phase, corrections. There we go. Yeah. Okay. Oh, brand. Sorry, I didn't speak about the brand. Yeah. The brand you want to use is Herman Springer. Herman Springer. That's the best. In regards to the fit, okay, you want it snug and you want it up here. Now, in regards to this whole thing about injuring the dog and trachea injuries and so on, if you're using the collar for negative reinforcement, meaning the dog applies pressure and relieves it, or you have a slight tug or pop, that will never happen. In regards to corrections, the only way you would turn around and you could injure the dog possibly is if literally the collar would be down here, not here. And if you would turn around and instead of correcting down and sideways, correct up. As I'm going to get the subscriber portion of the Instagram going, I'm going to purchase, I have to order it this week, I'm going to purchase one of those, I think it's called a Vimo stick, something you put your iPhone into. It has a tripod, it has a microphone, and the iPhone starts following you around and zooms in and out. It's going to be way more easy for me to make these videos. But if you just Google how to fit a prong collar, that will show you the mechanic of it. The mechanic of it is far less important than the actual psychology and understanding on how to use it. And I hope this video shows you how to use it correctly, you understand it, and you know, thousands of dogs in our shelters are killed because our shelters have been infiltrated by the positive reinforcement mafia. And these SOBs, they will put a dog to sleep, they will cut off its balls, they will medicate it, they will keep it in a cage, but they will not correct it. And what I've seen I've helped people before, of course. I have many people I work with over the years, but I never had a dog stay in my house like Little Mama, because all my dogs, they come to me from a puppy. And, you know, my dog is clicker loaded by the time it's 6 weeks old. It's, you know, just finished feeding off of the tit 3 weeks ago, and I already loaded it with a clicker. So when Little Mama arrived, you know, I was like, holy shit, man, this dog so excited to see me. But she expresses it in a way where she jumps up and she's nipping on my shoulder. I'm like, imagine I go to the shelter, I get this dog, and now I have kids. Even if there's no kids, who the hell is going to take a dog like this? And you know, we save lives when we use balanced dog training. And I'll just leave it at that because it's a topic that gets me going. Have a good day.